and welcome to
Torah in the Kitchen!
Today, we're going to be making grilled cheese sandwiches and talking Torah while we do it. So that way you, in isolation, have something to do.
Woohoo!
Let's begin with the bread. We have bread from Giant, and this is some form of ciabatta. I can't spell ciabatta. What we're going to do is we're going to cut it into sections so that way we can make the perfect grilled cheese.
Let's be clear here. He's the real chef. I kind of just come for the accompaniment.
And I'm not a great chef. But that doesn't have to stop you. So that way you can see what's happening. This is a knife that Zahava got me for my birthday. So we're going to cut the bread. We're going to cut off the ends because nobody wants ends in their sandwiches.
Nobody likes the ends, let's be clear.
And then, what's nice about ciabatta is that you can really kind of press it into a sandwich maker, and that way it's not too thick, so that way you don't really heat up everything in the middle. It's just the right size.
Now, some people cut bread normally, and some people cut bread like Gani.
Hold on, people will be able to see.
We make our sandwiches hefty, you know what I'm saying? Hefty sandwiches. So it's pretty crazy, Donnie, how everybody's stuck at home making their own grilled cheese sandwiches by themselves.
That's true, and it's very hard for a lot of people being in isolation. And so we thought maybe we could talk about some Torah that related to being with others or the power of community. So Hava, what did you want to share?
So I was just reading an article by Rabbi Sachs talking about how important it is to be part of a communal structure.
What we're doing right now, by the way, is putting a little bit of mayo on the outside so it'll give it a nice crispy exterior.
Well,
you could use olive oil too.
Yeah, we go all out with our truffle mayo. Also, these are the best dressings right here.
We're not paid to advertise for them.
I know, but they're such good dressings. Okay.
What we're doing right now is the bread is currently heating over there. And that gives it a little bit of a crispy exterior and makes it quite delicious. I don't know if that's the Maillard effect because I'm not a science teacher. But a science teacher could probably tell you about it, or you could Google it. While that's happening, what we're going to do is you want to have everything kind of prepped ahead of time to make it easier. So we've got a variety of cheese. So that way, if you're interested in having a different kind of flavor in your cheese, you can. So you might want something spicy and therefore have a pepper jack. We've got a little bit of mustard. Use any kind of mustard, but it really goes well with a good grilled cheese. Just a hint of mustard. You don't want to overdo it. And we're going to put some tomatoes in there. Cut them up so that way we can have an excellent grilled cheese sandwich. And we're back.
So, I mean, one of the points that Rabbi Sachs makes is really interesting. The first time it says the words not good in the Torah, that something is not tov, is when it talks about being alone.
Whoa.
And how difficult it is for people to be alone. Like
Lo tov hayod ha'adam levado.
Showing off your stuff. No, but that's what, like, why so much happens in a kahal. So much has to happen as, like, a social activity. It's so hard right now. We're all on our own.
Right, and we see kind of Abraham bringing together a community, and that's the Nefesh Asher Asu B'Charan, where he tries to bring people with him. It's unclear if that lasted, but Abraham really goes around building that community, and then Yitzchak maintains it, and then Yaakov has 12 sons, and that's really community, although during quarantine that might be a problem.
Right, and I mean, the first time we really see Bnei Yisrael mess up as a community is with the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf. Here's the crazy thing, though. Moshe doesn't react by saying, go back to your houses. He reacts by saying, let's figure out how to do community right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that he does community right is he teaches them then how to build a Mishkan, right? It's like, we're going to learn how to do this right. We're going to learn how to worship Hashem in the proper way.
So would you say that the Mishkan is maybe the center of our community?
Yeah, I think, and today our homes our shuls are really the center of our community, and that's why our homes often surround the shul.
And that's part of what's making this so hard for so many people is not being able to go to shul, not being able to see their friends, go to their regular shiurim, chavrusas. It's very isolating.
Yeah, often it's how people, even if they don't work, at least they get out of the house to go to shul or go to their shiurim. now people are glued to their screens. And for those people who don't necessarily have internet or don't have as much access to screens, or it's just hard to look at a screen all day, it's getting really difficult for people.
Right. We hope that this won't be too difficult for you to watch. Now I have to check and see on how our bread is doing. That looks good. So we're going to take it off of our heating substance. Again, if you don't have a panini press or a sandwich maker or anything like that, first of all, they're $10. Go get one. But also, you could really do this in the oven probably just as easily. So now, what we're going to do, we can do these one at a time, doesn't really matter. You can find any kind of filling that you really like. So anything with mayo in it is good. If you're not into mayo, that's also cool. This happens to be an olive dip. Doesn't really matter so much. So we're going to do one plain and one with an olive dip.
You really want your sandwich to be creamy. You kind of want to not overtake the bread, but like have some prominence in the creamy aspect and not just in the like bready, crunchy aspect.
Yeah, that's true. It gives you a whole different kind of mouthfeel for when you're eating your sandwich. So now that I've gotten kind of a base in there, we're going to line with tomatoes. And you're probably wondering, what bracha do you make on this sandwich? In case you're not wondering that, because you know that sandwiches are always hamotzi, here's some things that you should be aware of. When we make brachas on tomatoes, if you're having them independently, so then they would be the bracha of adama. Even though they're classified as a fruit by America or science or whatever, because they grow from the ground and they're
I got the cheese.
not, and they're, what is it, perennial, not annual? I always forget that. Not a gardener. But because you have to replant them every year, so that gives them the halachic category of being adama. Now that makes things a little bit more complicated for things like blueberries, and many folks will say that on blueberries you should be making ha'etz. And again, you should, check with your local Orthodox rabbi and, kind of figure out what you're doing. As I talk about that, so how is putting on cheese, which is shahakol. The halachas of cheese are fascinating and complicated, and maybe we'll have to have another session on that, a cook session, or maybe I can convince my chavrusa, Rabbi Enton, to do a show on this as well, because we're learning about cheese right now.
Guest speaker.
And he happens to be a way better chef. So as you can see, this is what the sandwich looks like before, and we're going to cover that bad boy, and we're going to put it in the sandwich maker and then prep the second sandwich. As we're doing that, let's talk a little bit more about hilchos brachos and not burning our hands. Things that are really hot should not be handled directly with your hands, as you can tell by me almost dropping the food. So, as we do this, so we're going to put a little bit more cheese on. So how do you want to put on the cheese?
Yeah, sure.
And do you want some mayo?
A little salt. I'll do a little mustard on that.
A little bit of mustard.
You do
on
mustard?
Hers. No, I didn't do any mustard on it.
A little mustard.
You can also put on a little bit of mayo if you want.
You'll notice that when I put the cheese on, I specifically put the spicy cheese over some of the other cheeses so that we could spread out the spice a little bit. It doesn't have to be too crazy, too much of a hard hit.
But adding a little bit of heat really does change the kind of sandwich that you're making. So, going back to the hilchos brachos point, one thing that's really nice about sandwiches is because they have bread and that's the mainstay of the actual food, you're ending up making hamotzi, and then that's going to cover kind of everything. Make sure to bench afterwards. But on top of that, let's say you're doing this with a cracker, and you just had a cracker with your tomato. How would you figure out what bracha to make then? Well, that brings us to the laws of ikar and tafel, primary and secondary. And the way that works is, if you have one primary food, then the other food would be supporting it, and you would make just your bracha on the primary food. Here's a great example of that. Let's say you don't really like hummus, but you need to get a little bit of protein into your diet. What you would do is, you could take your cracker, dip it in some hummus, but really you like the crackers, you would make a mazonos on that. Let's add another layer of complication, though. Let's say you also like tuna fish, and you're having a cracker. Then what do you do? So when it comes to mazonos, generally things that have the things that have the bracha mazonos, they're going to be independently considered significant, and you would make a bracha on that. And therefore, you would also go in your order of brachos and make a mazonos. But if you also like the tuna fish, you're going to make a shahakol as well, and you would make 2 brachos.
So is that same with the hummus?
So depending on the situation, you might end up having to make a second bracha on your hummus. What would happen with something that is not mazonos, but combining 2 different foods? Well, let's say you had a gluten-free cracker, and you were having maybe a tomato on top of your gluten-free cracker. If you were going to do that, then you might have to make 2 separate brachos also. But if you only cared about one of them, then you wouldn't be making 2 brachos. You'd only make 1.
Because it's a shahakal as opposed to a mizona.
Right.
So I would make my hadama first. I'd make my hadama on my
first.
tomato, and then make my shahakal on my gluten-free cracker.
That's right, Zahava. So, mizonos generally gets its own kind of primacy, and therefore, if you're having mizonos with other things, usually you're going to make a mizonos, at least. Sometimes you'll make 2 brachos. But if you're just combining 2 other foods, if there's one that's clearly primary, then you would make the bracha on that. Now, there is one potential exception to this that makes things very messy, which we're not going to go into. But what about sushi, you ask? Great question. So, sushi is a problem because it's not always clear which one is the ikar, the primary, and which one is tafel, secondary. And it's not even clear if it's the same thing as a cracker with something on it, or if it's considered a mixture, in which case it has a different set of rules. So we're going to let you talk to your own rabbi about that and figure out which one you think is really primary. Are you into the fish? Are you a no-fish kind of person? Do you like it for the rice? Do you like it for the cucumber?
Well, no matter what, you would say the mizono on the rice first, right?
So that's a great question. But really, rice is a liar. Rice seems like it's a regular mizonos, but because it's mizonos and nefashos, and the Gemara identifies it as being a different kind of grain, it actually doesn't take the same kind of primacy as all other classic mizonos. The 5 grains, as we generally assume they are, would be wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and oats. Spelling, browse, but probably not in that order. All right, let's take a look at our sandwiches and see how they're doing. That cheese is starting to melt. It's not quite melted yet, so we're going to take a brief intermission. All right, well, our sandwiches are out. I've already washed and made hamotzi on the ends. That's what they're good for. Zahava, how did we do?
It's great. It's really hot to hold. I need to share a plate with you here.
Yeah, you got to be really careful when dealing with hot substances. Make sure, safety first every time. Well, that's our show for today. Thanks for joining us on Torah in the Kitchen, and hopefully we'll have some more installments coming soon. Bye!